It's Thursday, December the 1st, 2022, and welcome to Narrative Live. Eric Garland is with us tonight. How are you, Eric? You good? Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me.
Howdy.
Okay. I get
Yep.
nervous when you don't
I can hear
respond.
you.
We have a big show tonight. We're going to talk a lot about the latest scandal in the Supreme Court. You know, there's yet another scandal. It's not being covered very much by the mainstream media, and we have to ask why. I mean, this is the third major scandal in just a few weeks that has shown up in the Supreme Court. This time it involves the Hobby Lobby case and Justice Alito. We'll get into the details. But as you discovered today, Sheldon Whitehouse has done an incredible job of bringing that story to the Senate floor today, and which was maybe it was yesterday, about, and we'll play a lot of that of his presentation today about the scheme, as he calls it, to corrupt the Supreme Court by the right-wing extremists. So that's coming up a little later on. But we also have a lot of breaking news today. And also later on, we should say, there's also the secret life of Elon Musk, in which we'll talk about his degrees, his university degrees, and whether he actually got the ones he says he has. And it doesn't matter that he lied about his degrees. So all of that potentially coming up in the next hour. Let's kick off with the breaking news of the day, which is just come out of, I think it's the 11th Circuit, has ruled that the special master in the Mar-a-Lago documents case is not a valid thing. They've reversed the whole thing. So Donald Trump, who had been relying quite extensively on this notion of having a special master go through all these documents, which he had secretly held and stolen really from the U.S. government at Mar-a-Lago, his resort in Florida, he'd relied on the special master as being a way to sort of delay the whole sequence of the law. And it seems like he's not going to get to do that any longer. The 11th Circuit has really killed that as an option for him. Do you know much more about this decision?
Yep. So Judge Eileen Cannon, who was just a district judge, it was determined that she did not have jurisdiction over the matter to begin with.
And she was appointed by him.
Circuit. That's right, and so were two of the judges on the 11th Circuit, which covers Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. One was Bush, 43, and two were Trump. And it was a lacerating commentary by them, where they're like, basically, this is nonsense, and it's just getting in the way of the law, and we cannot create a rule here, because of course a ruling from them could become, precedent case law that could be referred to. Whereas if anybody goes around, getting a stay in that way, that you could interfere with with the prosecution, because there was a warrant that was granted, I believe in the District of DC, which is where they're prosecuting that crime. The special master thing was keeping that information from being able to go before a grand jury, by any prosecutor. And it's just interesting. We now have Jack Smith, the famed war crimes prosecutor, who is assigned to Trump, and he was being denied the ability to use that information until today. Mm-hmm. And now he has it, and now it can go before a grand jury. Merry Christmas, everyone.
So in fact, that is a huge deal. What you're saying is that, now that he has this information available to him, there's no longer this delay. He can take this to the court directly. But it was also an attempt by Donald Trump to really try to get this to the Supreme Court. That was one of the reasons he was sort of chasing this 11th Circuit appeal, was to see if he could actually land up something with the Supreme Court, because he believes he has that court sort of in his pocket. As we'll find out a little later on, that may be the case, although it's becoming increasingly unlikely that they could use that influence anymore. But we'll explain that a little bit later on. But it is interesting that this is now going to be in a different circuit. So if it is in DC, it's more likely to. Yeah.
Point of order there. The plaintiff applied for relief in the Supreme Court, but that request was denied. Trump v. United States. That was October 13th. Right. So his
initial intention was to try and get it to the Supreme Court. That was why he initially applied up to that appeal. Although I don't really understand that level of Supreme Court jurisprudence, so I'm not going to try to go through that with you, but I'll take your word for it. So let's talk a little bit about then the implications for Donald Trump, because we have had a terrible week legally, if you think about it. He's had that loss with the Oath Keepers. That's a win for everybody else, in that there were two guilty seditious conspiracy charges. Two people found guilty of those seditious conspiracy charges. That's significant because it means that the noose is tightening around the inner circle of Donald Trump, and potentially Donald Trump as well. So that's been a terrible thing for him this week. And now this is another big setback for his legal issues. And there are mounting legal issues on many levels. But this one really is probably, some people say, the more likely to be the thing that he gets indicted on, because it's such a clear-cut case versus the January 6th case, which is a little more complicated.
Yeah, I mean, this is open and shut. This is if you have documents that belong to the U.S. government that are, especially the ones that are classified, if you mishandle them, you're going to jail. That's kind of it.
Yeah,
and so that's what makes this is the quick reaction one. And I think the evidence, is mounting about the January 6th stuff, and we're going to learn more about it. But this is the open and shut for a lot of people in that organization, which is, I think the way it's been, pitched in the media is that somehow Donald Trump himself had bushels full of, documents that he loaded into his car or something. And, people can't imagine how, the logistics work of these documents, where they belong to begin with, who might have had access to them to put them anywhere, much less Florida. People probably imagine that it's Trump, stuffed this in his underwear or something. In reality, it took a whole lot of people to get those documents to where they belonged, to where they didn't belong, at some goddamn golf course in Florida, right, next to the lawnmower or wherever they put it. And in reality, it's not just him. It was, probably a fairly large group of idiots that made this suicidal deal to take these documents. Now the question is, why would you risk that much? These guys, even if they lied on their SF-86 form, they did. Even if they did, they also signed off on if you misplace this stuff, we're going to put you in prison. Even if the guy who had him sign it was chuckling, you'll be fine. It wasn't going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
So who benefited from this? And I'm just assuming, this was either to repay a debt or somebody paid money or whatever. But, who needed these documents? Because you just,
Well, there is indications from some people. Certainly, there's a lot of, I'll leave it a rumor now. I think it's more substantiated than rumor, that some of these documents were floating around on the international stage and being offered for sale. And if that's the case, that we have, that Donald Trump, former president of the United States, is busy selling American classified secrets, it could compromise a lot of people, maybe even cost their lives. That is
or
very
Kash Patel, or Jared Kushner, or Ivanka, or any of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone even connected to this is, just in a world of hurt.
And let's not forget, Mar-a-Lago, we now know, is a place where people like Guo Wengi used to spend his time. He had a membership there. He's a Chinese spy of some sort. You've got these characters from the extreme white supremacist wing of the Trump GOP that go there for dinner. I mean, it's not exactly the kind of place you want to store your classified documents, especially the ones you've stolen. But I mean, it's kind of crazy that we have all these state secrets in a resort, basically a publicly accessible resort. It's just insane. The other bad news that may be coming for Donald Trump tomorrow is out of the January 6th committee in the House, because they are set to make referrals in criminal prosecutions based on their investigation. Now, these are just the initial recommendations. I think they're being made by Raskin's committee, and Raskin's committee will make it to the rest of the January 6th committee of who they think should be criminally referred for prosecution to the DOJ. They're indicating that it's much more than just Trump that is going to be up for there. So, which makes sense considering all the evidence they had. But there was some criticism originally that Liz Cheney was focusing too much on Trump. Can't be that anyone focuses too much on Trump, but there are indications that these recommendations are going to come down as recommendations to the committee tomorrow, and that'll be very interesting to watch, because that's hard for the DOJ to really not move quickly after that?
Well, I mean, they're not connected, not officially. The DOJ operates with independence, and there cannot be any communication outside of a criminal referral. But in that regard, a congressional committee might be considered more credible, but wouldn't be in any different position than a private citizen making a referral based on specific statutes. Like, you can type these things up and hand them in to different agencies if you think a crime has been committed. The thing about Congress is they have subpoena power, they've had hearings, and they're more credible. And you've got like whip smart prosecutors on that committee. So they're generally quite a bit more credible than your average, but officially it's independent. Officially, it doesn't matter. Practically, though, the difference is none of this is reflective of the DOJ activity, which is why the propaganda attempts to make it sound like DOJ was lagging the Jan 6 committee when they don't coordinate. They're not allowed to coordinate. They have to be independent of each other, or it's inherently political. I mean, think about that. Even if it's bipartisan, if DOJ is following Jan 6, it's political, and that's unacceptable. We want.
Are there indications though that they did in fact pick up the pace once they started seeing the congressional hearings? That it was those hearings that helped push things along a little. It's not that the investigations hadn't begun, but that the new evidence was showing up in that committee. I think that's. I don't know. Who knows?
That's not how, with the evidence being collected via warrant. I mean, I don't think people understand the volume that can come in, and that when the DOJ goes to indict somebody, they're picking the absolute path of least resistance to burying this thing if it ever sees a courtroom, which is why 98% of criminal charges from DOJ are settled in a plea deal. They only go when they know they're dunking the basketball on a 4-foot hoop, essentially. Yeah. And they collect an incredible volume, so far beyond what a congressional committee. I mean, those guys, some of those people have, I think all of them have some degree of clearance to be on that committee. But it's not comparable. I think there may have been a correlation, but not causation. It may have correlated with, as Merrick Garland's operation, and remember, there was a lot of dirt in a lot of these U.S. attorneys' offices from the Barr period. So imagine trying to prosecute when some of your offices you're prosecuting out of are crime scenes themselves. That's not easy. No. And I think the January 6th committee, even if I don't believe that it pushed, and I believe it shouldn't have pushed anything that Garland's DOJ was up to. However, for the American people and for the world's perception, the fact that they have the freedom to not necessarily be indicative of what's happening in Garland's grand juries, the FBI, and the offices of Inspector General, that's a great thing. That's not a bad thing. It's they can collect their own stuff, because a lot of this, I mean, dude, we do a show we're not sitting on classified intel, right? We're looking and going, wait, they were all at the what hotel? The Willard Hotel? Well, that's right across the street from those assholes. That's what this show is. Yep. There's, Congress had a little bit more, they could request stuff that would be in their committees. A little bit more. A touch more. But you can be free to, get the narrative. I mean, my point was, it's really obvious. I mean, look, you had these guys go, we're not going to accept the election. It's rigged. And the election happened. They said, we don't accept it. And they said, we're going to attack the Capitol. And then they did. I mean, but it was more obvious not to us. The JFK assassination. No. It's a magic bullet. Were the Cubans there? They said, we're not accepting the election. Fuck you. Donald Trump stays president. And we're going to have a bunch of meatheads attack the Capitol. And that happened in order. This is not the grassy knoll. But I think in the minds of many people, and probably some investigators in the DOJ, this was a groundswell that originated from the ground up. And, people showed up and took the matters into their own hand. I don't think it was until we saw Liz Cheney first appearance on that committee special that they did in prime time that we really began to understand the complexity of Donald Trump's. Well, we probably had a good indication here, but for the public to really understand how close Donald Trump was. And this was that Cassidy Hutchison's testimony that I think really solidified it for people that there was so much going on inside the West Wing to coordinate this,
that it was an operation that came down from the very, very top. And I think that some of that information was new, I'm sure, to the people at the DOJ, because they're just not, they weren't looking at the case from that way. They were looking at it from the ground up, where they were trying to get people who were the foot soldiers, and did so very successfully. At some point you had to look at it from a political perspective, and the committee was much more able to look at it from a committee perspective, simply because they're in that zone. I mean, they know the people involved.
Well, I'm trying to think of who the woman was who went over, who was a former judge advocate for the Marines, who went over to OANN there and like coordinated
Christina Bobb.
Yeah, it's her. That's her. Like, that was, when you go, oh wait, there's a chick who works for a network that's connected to the Russians that was lining up the denial of the vote at the state level with these morons in the White House and in the Willard Hotel and Congress. Like, again, this is stuff. I mean, realistically, Zev, you and I could probably prosecute a couple of these cases with like the transcripts of these shows, assuming that they're accurate. I mean, like,
but I know what you're saying. So who do you think is going to get up there tomorrow? Who do you think they're going to recommend for prosecution?
It's a good question. I haven't considered it all. I would, if I had to guess, it would be some people that I would have to guess that they're going to recommend Jim Jordan and Kevin McCarthy for charges of contempt for disobeying them, for refusing to cooperate. Probably some people that you'd think of. They'll probably surprise us with a big one like, hey, we think Rudy Giuliani did some bad stuff. If I had to guess. But that, what I'm looking forward to is more Christina Bobbs, because that wasn't a name I was on top of. And when her name, came up and I went and looked at her resume, I'm like, okay, wait, what? Oh, she served in Afghanistan on intelligence matters and the judge advocate. And then, then it all made, it's like, that was a new name. It had some foreign connections. It had some Mike Flynn stuff. It was a mess, and it's like, that's the stuff I want. I want the freakos that I haven't heard of yet that were part of this, that, like, I want to know who was coordinating Jeffrey Clark over at DOJ. I want to know who coordinated with the Pentagon to unzip America's pants that day. That's who I want.
That's actually a very, very good one. Yeah, absolutely. The people at the Pentagon, the people at the Secret Service. I'm curious about, which Secret Service agents are supposed to keep this to themselves. Ooh. And why? And,
I would love, that is that stuff there. That's what I want. And I got to think that it's so sensitive. The J6 committee, this is the difference between DOJ and the J6 committee, is like, that stuff is so secret. That's going to be in an office of Inspector General somewhere, and they're probably just going to go to the DOJ straight. So I don't think we're going to learn about the Secret Service guys until the indictments fall on their heads, because it's so bad.
That really is bad. It's not going to be there, and I still wonder why, is the Moonies. They have been absent from everyone's investigation into
we all have our personal favorites on the bingo card that we want to see show up here. Right?
I know the Moonies had a thing here, and I'm guessing the reason.
Bring me Scientologists. I know they were fucking around.
I'm guessing that has to do with counterintelligence. That's why we're not going to see the Moonies involved in there. But they should be there, but they're not. It's probably likely to be.
There's a rogue North Korean somewhere in the woodpile.
We need him. We need him for the plot twist. But I do expect Roger Stone will be up there.
This is like Michael the penultimate. This is the penultimate episode in the season, and it's like the second one before the last one. I think it's gonna be like, whoa, the twist before the other twist before the final.
We need the North Koreans,
the Red Wedding.
But it's I think Roger Stone, Michael Flynn, they're the kind of people that I hope to see being up for criminal referral, and I do think that they should put Donald Trump up for criminal referral, especially because he hasn't shown up to testify as he said he would, but also because he should just be there because all roads indicates all roads take us to him.
Logical. Yeah. And I've been of a mind where everyone focuses just on him and not how this all happened. But through the lens of the J6 committee, who they keep coming back to is, the guy who was president of the United States. And a lot of this is about future deterrence and setting standards. And we don't want this behavior ever again from anyone.
Yeah.
So of all the criminal referrals, I think for the J6 committee to say, hey, this is going to shock you, but we think there's some criminal charges that should, Donald Trump was very clearly the head of this seditious conspiracy. If there was anybody above him in it, it was maybe, Xi Jinping,
Yeah, people are not going to show up for their hearings, but yes, it might go that far.
Yes,
in terms of Americans, Donald Trump is probably right up there, who could be held responsible for this. Although there are others, and maybe this is a good time to segue into the other big story of the day, which is this, ongoing corruption at the Supreme Court. This is endlessly dripping of drip drop of information on a weekly basis now about things that are going on at the Supreme Court, which make no sense. But not only do they make no sense, there is actually no way to prosecute anything that happens or to investigate anything that happens in the Supreme Court. It's just sort of a kind of a no rule place. Everyone's self-regulating. Everyone gets to decide what they are allowed to do. And, this latest, and this is a very cheeky slide, of course. I mean, it's not intended to indicate that all these people are doing terrible things, although most of them were.
That's pretty fair. Everything fair. I'm looking at looks pretty legit.
Yeah, but a few of these justices probably shouldn't be there because they were, nominated to the court by a president that shouldn't have been president. That's for sure. But then you've got people like Thomas who clearly were involved in the January the 6th coup. I mean, I don't even think it's a question about his wife anymore. I think it's him who was involved in organizing things for the January the 6th coup, and certainly in covering up the documentation that was trying to be entered into the committee's investigation. That certainly was something he was involved in, but there's no ways he, knowing what we know about what his wife was doing, how could he not know what she was doing? And if he was aware of what she was doing, he would have been involved in it because it fits his political MO. It just fits his who he is. This is his mission in life. So, the fact that Thomas can still be on the Supreme Court is kind of stunning. But then there's the Justice Alito scandal, which is just brewing for a few days now, and people have not picked this up, but I think it's absolutely scandalous. You've got basically a Supreme Court justice who leaked the judgment in a major, major case. We're talking about the Hobby Lobby case, which is going to restrict the rights of people who worked at Hobby Lobby or any other religious place, I guess is the way they were thinking about it, from gaining access to reproductive health resources through Obamacare. So this was that one big case in 2014 that everyone was looking at about whether there was a way for the conservative right-wing movement to limit Obamacare. And, eventually Alito wrote the winning decision there that that Hobby Lobby were allowed to not provide that reproductive care to their employees. Now, the thing that happened with the leaking is that he was part of this giant scheme. I mean, maybe you know more about it, but it's this multi-year, maybe 2-decade-long scheme, multi-million-dollar scheme to sort of wine and dine and influence all these justices, particularly 3 of them, in a bribery scheme. I mean, that's the only way you can decide. I look at it and look at these people were bribed.
Sheldon Whitehouse today, this was the 19th such speech, and he has come out really strong against Leonard Leo, against the Federal Society. And today he dropped the elbow on everybody. Like, he just came out and said, these guys have been bribed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, they and their spouses have gotten meals, trips, perks. And in exchange for that, the people that did the bribing, who got, I didn't realize that they had a little clubhouse across the street from the Supreme Court where
they owned a building.
For Christ's sake.
Not a clubhouse, an entire building that they've operated.
That's
for
the Mickey
decades.
Mouse Club, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, but I'm sorry. I'm just insouciant about these corrupt, this criminal scheme.
We're going to be playing some of that Sheldon Whitehouse clip in just a second. Sorry, keep going if you want to keep going.
I'll get my volcano suit on because it was like, it was just flamethrower all over the place. And I'd just like to point out that Hobby Lobby case there that Alito leaked out. Do you remember a guy who's now the fastest senator? He's got the best time in the 100-meter dash in the Senate. Do you remember? Josh Hawley.
Oh, yes. I was like,
Yes,
who's a runner? Yeah, okay, Josh Hawley. Yeah.
Hawley's the runner. Hawley argued the Hobby Lobby case, and he didn't pass the
Ah,
goddamn Supreme Court bar.
oh, so
He
the
did it
scheme
without
is
having
even
passed the
more
SCOTUS
corrupt.
bar.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
and it's just a bit a ribbon around all this. Everyone understands. Alito that had dinner with two of these right-wing extremist funders that were part of this giant scheme, and told them beforehand what his decision was going to be for the Hobby Lobby case. So they were able to prepare the entire sort of extremist right-wing anti-reproduction part of the right of the GOP were able to prepare a PR strategy. They knew exactly what to look for that day. They knew exactly how it was going to play out. They were able to see it. That is not that's not how things
It's
should be
almost
done.
like that's against the ethics for a reason.
Yeah.
That and no judge is allowed to do that. I mean
No,
that is
no.
grounds for censure for every judge, other than
Except the
these
Supreme
guys.
Court. The Supreme
And
Court
that's
doesn't
what
have.
Sheldon Whitehouse's point was.
Yeah, exactly. Let's take a listen. I've got two clips here from Sheldon Whitehouse from the Scheme, episode 19, as it turns out.
The court lawyer says that Justice and Mrs. Alito did not receive any reportable gifts from the rights. How does the court's lawyer know that? Did he ask Justice Alito? Do they have a record of that conversation? Did he talk to the rights?
That's a good.
We don't know the answer to any of these questions because there is no process in place at the court for conducting these kinds of investigations. No process, no independence, no inquiry. Let's assume that the substance of the court's first letter is true. Yes, the court has an ethics code. But even if the court has an ethics code without any provision for a complaint to be delivered, without any provision for inquiry, without any process for enforcement, without any independence, and without any ultimate determination ever being arrived at and reported, that's not an ethics code, that's a wall decoration. Congress understood this point more than 40 years ago when it passed a law mandating a process for federal courts to receive and investigate misconduct complaints against federal judges. That law just doesn't apply to the Supreme Court. So where are we? The court does not even have a clear place for people to submit ethics complaints. The court.
So, I mean, it's a very valid point he's making there. I mean, the reason we even know what we know today about what happened in the last few months, years, in this case, with Alito's leaking of this decision, was because it came up in the newspapers. There's a big inquiry, and it was in the Washington Post, I think maybe it was New York Times, but I think it was the Post. And then, Mr. Whitehouse himself has been a very, very effective sort of questioner of the Supreme Court on these things. But otherwise, if it weren't for him and a few other very active senators and the media, this stuff would be swept under the carpet and we'd never know about it because there's no way for you or me or anyone else to complain about stuff that's going on in the Supreme Court.
And that was his point. There's no
Yeah.
process here. That process is the bones of justice. And he actually, I don't know if you got a screen cap of this or have a clip of it, but he went to a Gary Larson cartoon of a boneless chicken
Yes.
farm where it's all these chickens laying over. This is kind of from the sort of the era of chicken McNuggets being a new thing. But he's like, they're the boneless. It's the boneless chicken ranch of of justice, which is pretty funny.
I don't have the slide, but absolutely, you're absolutely, that is it's very true about it.
But one of the reasons he's a stickler for this, I don't know if you know his background, Sheldon Whitehouse, but he's from the state of Rhode Island. Of course, he's senator there. But before that, he was Attorney General of Rhode Island, and he was U.S. Attorney for 5 years in Rhode Island. So he was a prosecutor in the great state of Rhode Island. And I don't know if you know much of Rhode Island's particular culture, but let's put it this way. In North Providence, you can get some really good Italian food. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah. I actually am very aware.
Really great.
Very aware of that, of that part
There's
of the world.
There's like only 2 places on the East Coast, or 3 places on the East Coast that I would go to an Italian restaurant because I cook it at home otherwise. New York, North Boston, and North Providence. So it ain't the first time that Sheldon Whitehouse has seen systemic corruption or the influence of the mob over people.
I once worked at a TV station, and there was a new station manager that came in from Rhode Island. Italian guy, very nice guy, well, sharply dressed guy. Didn't F around with him, that's for sure, because he
Sounds
he meant
wise.
business. He meant business. Let's listen.
By the way,
another...
you know what's funny with everybody with Rhode Island? It's always funny to if they say they're from Rhode Island, you say, where are you from? And they'll give you some town name. Is that near Providence? Always works.
I mean, it's a system, right? They have a system of operating there, and it sort of has been their way for a long time. But they do have some great prosecutors that have come from there. But let's listen to another part of Sheldon Whitehouse's here, because he points the finger directly here at the Chief Justice himself.
The day after the Alito Dobbs opinion leaked, Chief Justice Roberts directed the marshal of the court to investigate, calling the leak a singular and egregious breach of trust that is an affront to the court and the community of public servants who work here, end quote. Is a 20-year, $30 million private lobbying operation involving a base of operations, expensive dinners, trips to private retreats, cozying up to court employees, and potentially another Alito opinion leak not worthy of the same response? Well, Justice Alito denies leaking the results of the 2014 case and says he never detected any effort to obtain confidential information or to influence anything he did. So let's shift from the problems with this cozy, multi-decade, multi-million-dollar influence scheme to the problems with the court's inquiry into it. The first problem is no inquiry. The day after the Alito Dobbs opinion.
Yeah, so that's it's backtrack.
The problem with the inquiry is they didn't do one.
Yeah, and there is no, and what he's saying there is Chief Justice Roberts did react to the first leak about the Dobbs ruling around Roe versus Wade. He did have an inquiry about that, but he didn't have an inquiry about this one. And this seems like a much bigger scandal involving, multiple decades and potentially the bribing of 3 Supreme Court justices. Thomas, Alito, and Scalia were all accused, basically, in the reporting around this, of being bribed with these fancy dinners, fancy events, trips to wherever, hunting lodges or whatever it was. What were they doing at those events, and what were they doing at those lodges if they weren't being influenced by the people who are trying to influence them? I mean, clearly that's bribery. It's just, there's no other way to look at that kind of thing. And you've got a general sort of I know maybe people are just so tired that they can't bear any more corruption news, but the Supreme Court does seem to be like a law unto itself, if maybe even no law unto itself. There's just like a lawless environment, which is kind of bizarre for the Supreme Court of the United States.
That makes sense, though. I mean, Amy Coney Barrett has no business being there, right? Yeah. She's, as you say, Leonard Leo groomed. Gorsuch, should have been Merrick Garland's seat, but we've got him otherwise employed.
He's busy.
We found something to do with his talent. Weird.
Kavanaugh, same thing. I mean, really, no reason to be there at all.
Devil's Triangle McBoof beer is, had some issues there. He dropped some new knowledge I didn't know. There were 85 different substantive complaints against Kavanaugh for his conduct on the bench.
That's right.
I think came out.
Today. Yeah.
I was like, and he's like, yeah, and that never got visited. And
that's a very good point. Very good point. So this was when he was a federal judge. 85 complaints or something like that, and they were just all dropped because he got promoted into this bigger job, the Supreme Court. None of those complaints land up being investigated. I mean,
yeah,
there's something
so
wrong.
We didn't look at who paid off his. We didn't look at who paid his debts. We didn't look at how he got a home equity line of credit and didn't do the construction. We didn't look at 85, complaints about him. And then we found out 4,500 tips to the FBI were routed straight to the White House around the DOJ. That one neat. We were talking about who, seeing people get in trouble for this, the Trump era that you haven't heard of. Well, whoever was involved routing FBI tips to a political institution instead of to the FBI, they need to be buried under the prison.
I mean, it was Chris Wray. That's the thing. It goes right up to Chris Wray. It was his doing, and he sort of has acknowledged it. But if under
has he acknowledged that?
I think he's acknowledged
that.
I think he acknowledged that when he spoke when he testified in front of White House's committee. I'll have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure that he said yes. Look, it's different times might have had him resign. Probably should have resigned, but who knows? There's so much going on there that it's hard to tell. He seems to have the confidence of Merrick Garland and President Biden, and let's see if that is well warranted. I hope people start paying more attention to this story about Alito. I think it's the most stunning, egregious misuse of power that we've seen in a long time from someone who is not an elected official, someone who's got a position for life. It's remarkable that they've allowed the
all federal judges have.
Yeah,
all federal judges have positions for life. But these guys have like no higher power that can be appealed to.
Yeah,
and one of the things that the White House was talking about was changing that. Mm-hmm. We can change the Constitution, we can change the law, and we can do it in a way that does not interfere with the independence of the judiciary at the SCOTUS level. And if there's anything that you learn if you're like a regular court watcher and you start trying to read Supreme Court opinions that are based on precedent, on precedent, on precedent, on principle, on precedent, on more principle, on English common law, on Sumerian law or whatever, is that you don't really understand exactly what they're doing. It's the Hobby Lobby stuff. If your magic sky friend says you don't need to do something, then you can ignore American law. Hobby Lobby was a little simpler and worse. Yeah. But most of the stuff at the Supreme Court is more subtle than that and actually based on jurisprudence. And we don't want to interfere with that. And we wouldn't know what to do in most of the cases if we did want to interfere with it. There's a way to, your wife can't be, taking $700,000 from the Heritage Foundation.
No.
While you're doing this gig. That's pretty easy. And if we find out that your bank account's getting filled by someone we don't know about, then that needs inquiry. That has nothing to do with your decision in this case or that case, or whether you gave a writ of cert to this case or that case. Hands off. That part of the independence of the Supreme Court, that needs to be sacrosanct. But taking bribes ain't sacrosanct. And I doubt the founding fathers, if they were in front of us, if we got to ask the guys behind the Federalist Papers, hey, when you thought of the Supreme Court, did you think that we couldn't look into them being bribed? They'd be like, are you kidding? We wrote half the laws here so people aren't bribed by foreign princes, Casimirs, sultans.
It's a gravy train.
Like the Saudis.
Yeah. A reminder, by the way, it's interesting to remember that Hobby Lobby, if you recall, the name of this company, this crafts company in Texas, is known for also stealing antiquities from Iraq during the Iraq War, and illegally.
They're all-purpose scumbags.
Yeah, and they've put some of that, I guess, in their own Museum of the Bible in DC, because they have a nonprofit called the Museum of the Bible, if I'm not mistaken. And some of these antiquities are there. But I mean, this is not a company that doesn't have an agenda. It clearly has a biblical agenda, but it also has been involved in criminal activity by stealing antiquities from the good people of Iraq and exporting them illegally during the war.
Sure.
You would think that would be enough to say to someone, hey, maybe I don't want to go and hang out with the Hobby Lobby people. But no, apparently he was okay with hanging out with the Hobby Lobby people and telling them what he was going to do. And I think they even attended and sat in one of his seats. They've got the justices have some seats reserved for them at the Supreme Court. I think the Hobby Lobby couple went and had a couple of those seats. This is the kind of stuff that is, makes people shake their head about justice and about there being two layers of justice in the United States. So hopefully this gets into people's radar a little bit more. Boy, we have lots to talk about. We can talk about, I was going to talk a little bit about China and Macron, and then I was going to do Elon Musk. Elon Musk's interesting from my part of the world, but why don't we talk a little bit about what's happening globally with China, because a lot of this is stuff that's not getting attention in other in other news organizations, and I think it's worthy of some attention here. There was a incredibly detailed report issued by the Department of Defense. It was just yesterday, or maybe the day before, to the House about China's growth and China's expansionist ideals around the world. And as we watch Macron arriving for his White House state dinner with Biden, we know that one of the subjects that has come up in conversation between the two leaders has been China, and just sort of what should NATO do in response to what could become aggression from China towards Taiwan, which is pretty much expected now. But this report that, I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, but it's got an incredibly detailed look at what Xi is planning to do with his military and the expansion of their military, and all with the goal of really reuniting China by 2049. So, it's no longer, well, it hasn't been theoretical for a long time, but it's happening. The buildup of the militarization of Chinese society is happening before our very eyes, and with a target of really attacking Taiwan, amongst other sort of foreign expansionist ideals. Did you get a chance to look at this, or do you have any thoughts on it broadly?
I haven't read the report, but the phrase in Chinese there, the community of common destiny, that means a world that they run.
Yeah.
The common destiny is you share ours with us, which we run. So you run, we run you.
Yeah, and there's no doubt.
And so,
that's the goal, is to
they wanted to take over the world.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They want to take over the world. I'm going to actually read this to everyone so they can just get a sense of what it is we're talking about here. You can actually read it clearly. Oh, here we go. In 2049, so Xi has two plans. There was one plan going up to 2049, but he split it into two separate sections. And so the first stage is from 2021 to 2035. So we're already well into that. And during this phase, the party aims for the PRC to basically meet its initial thresholds for becoming a great modern socialist country. In this stage, the PRC will likely continue to prioritize economic development as the central task, but rather than rapid economic growth, it will seek to address its uneven economic development and inequalities so that Beijing is recognized as a new principal contradiction in PRC society in the new era, yada, yada, yada. So by 2035, the PRC will also seek to increase its economic and technological strength to become a global leader in innovation, and aim to basically complete its military modernization. The PRC will also seek to significantly strengthen its cultural soft power and improve its domestic rule of law and governance systems. So that global leader in innovation means overtaking the United States in every aspect of the military might of China. That's basically the rest of this report goes into the details around that. But that's a significant goal, and we're maybe a decade away from that, if their plans are accurate. So terrifying on many levels, because it does mean that we have, our worst fears really are being realized there. And in the second stage, 2035 to 2049, the PRC aims to complete its development and attain national rejuvenation. This is the global leader in terms of comprehensive national strength and international influence. This is basically when they take over the world, as you pointed out, as you called it. The world-class military, and assume a leading position within the international order, revised in line with Beijing's overall foreign policy goal to establish its community of common destiny, or the PRC's preferred official translation, community with a shared future for mankind, which is their shared future. So this is as I was struck by the clarity around all of this, and how specific it is, and how this is really the challenge that America.
Well, Rishi Sunak in the UK, Rishi Sunak said the golden age of China and UK relations is over.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at Macron, when you look at what's going on with NATO, everything is shifting towards a real re-examination of the world's relationship with China, and it's a hard one because they're not going to stop, and there's only so much soft influence that people can use against this kind of international. I don't want to call it aggression, but it is kind of aggression. There's no other way to describe it.
Oh, it's absolutely. I mean, that military supremacy that they seek was through stealing our stuff. They can't make it themselves.
Right.
And
very, very.
We're going to take back the chip manufacturing. We lowered the boom on Huawei and ZTE equipment entirely in the last 2 weeks. I was like, it's done. Your crap's coming out. But, because a lot of, this is the deep stuff that needs to happen now is, we had some traders in this country who allowed Huawei to put in, telecom equipment near our missile silos. That's done.
Yeah.
We're done letting incompetent mobsters run the most powerful nation in the history of the planet. It's done, guys.
Thankfully.
If you're a mob boss, if you're a mob toady in whatever city, whatever scummy corner of America you inhabit, party's over. Sorry.
It is indeed.
Love the intelligence community.
In fact, that party might be over, but the domain name party, that's just beginning. And we'll tell you during this commercial break a little bit about that. And then the other side of this, we'll talk about Elon Musk and his lies about his degree.
Hi there, it's Zev from Narrative. Have you ever had a great business idea but just didn't know where to start? Well, one of the first steps to building a new business is a domain name by Hover. That's because it's more important than ever to have an online presence, and your domain name by Hover is your first step in building your online brand. For a limited time at hover.com/reach, you get 10% off. Hover makes it quick and easy to find the perfect domain name for your business with over 400 available extensions. And with their Connect feature, you can easily connect your Hover domain name to many popular website builders with just a few clicks. Plus, Hover offers free Who Is Privacy. That's free Who Is Privacy. That protects your personal information from being released online. Don't let the complicated search, sign up, and connection process of other domain providers stop you from starting your online brand today. Hover makes it easy to get started, so what are you waiting for? Find your perfect domain name at hover.com/reach. Plus, Narrative Live viewers get 10% off right now if you use the promo code REACH, that's REACH, or go to hover, hover.com/reach, REACH. We want to thank Hover for sponsoring this show, and hopefully you'll use their services to help us continue to do our shows here on Narrative. The Secret Life of Elon Musk. We did one episode of this, and then we got completely sidetracked by the fact that he was buying Twitter. And of course, we let some of this narrative hide in my inbox for a little while. But it's worth talking a little bit more about Elon Musk and about one particular chapter of his life where he basically lied about his university degrees. Let's back up a little bit here and explain to you how all of this fits into why it matters for Elon Musk anyhow in the first place. For one thing, these are all the things that he sort of claims to have been in his life, everything from the creator of the EV to just being a babe magnet to being, there's all this mythology around Elon Musk that's kind of hard to believe because it's impossible for any one person to do all those things. And now it turns out that some of it is beginning to sort of fray, and because we've discussed here on the show, he certainly is under Chinese influence to a certain or greater extent. But he's also lied about some of the fundamental things that would normally get you the kind of jobs that he has, like being the Twitter CEO. It's worthwhile just recalling a little bit about how he got to where he is today. Before he was part of the PayPal mafia, which is sort of what happened in 1999 when he and Peter Thiel and a bunch of other people started PayPal. He did something called Zip2, which is something that he and his brother, I think, developed, and it was basically a compression software, if you like. That was in 1995. He started developing it in Canada when he still lived in Canada, but then moved to Silicon Valley to raise all that funding. It's around that time that he said that he had attended Stanford, which he never attended. Despite his many claims to have attended Stanford, he never went there. In fact, his only place he's ever been, as far as we can tell, was Penn. And even there, he said he got his physics degree, and by all accounts, he didn't even get a physics degree. He got a Bachelor of Arts degree. Does it really matter in the grand scheme of things? I'm sure people lie about their resumes a lot. This seems to matter to me because he's, inventing things like space rockets that could go into space. So it matters if he doesn't have a physics degree, one would think, or self-driving cars. It matters that he should, that these cars should have some sort of scientific backing to them. If he's claiming to have that kind of knowledge, it certainly adds a layer of belief in his abilities. So here's the evidence that we have around this. One thing, where he did go to college, which was in Pennsylvania, he operated basically a full-on frat house there, by all accounts. If you look at this particular coverage here, someone called it was a full-out unlicensed speakeasy, which you sort of would expect for Elon Musk in some ways. This reporting says Musk blossomed even more at Penn and really started to feel comfortable while hanging out with his fellow physics students. At Penn, and he wasn't physics students, by the way. At Penn, he met people that thought like him. May said there were some nerds there. He so enjoyed them. I remember going for lunch with them, and they were talking physics things. They were saying A plus B equals pi squared or whatever. They would laugh out loud. It was cool to see him so happy. Once again, however, Musk did not make many friends among the broader school body. It's difficult to find former students who remember him being there at all. But he did make one very close friend named Adia Ressi, who would go on to be a Silicon Valley entrepreneur in his own right, and is to this day tied with Elon as anyone. And I believe this guy, Mr. Adia Ressi, was one of the funders of that Zip2 company. But it is interesting that he didn't actually get the physics degree there. He didn't study that, as far as we can tell, and that he didn't really know a lot of people on campus because maybe he wasn't at campus as much as people think he was. Here is the degree that we could find of him. So this is just your a Bachelor of Arts degree. I mean, there's no physics thing here. It's just this is the one thing he was able to show that he did definitely go to the University of Pennsylvania, and he did get a Bachelor of Arts degree, but there's no indication that he got the physics degree. There is also, here's a letter from, this is from Stanford University.
Stanford's registrar, no such record.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, why is no such record of him? Because he said he went there. Now, he does have some complicated explanation of how he had applied and then he chose not to, and then there's a whole story going on here. But that still isn't what he kept telling people, because what he kept telling people all the way through his early part of his career is that he had been to Stanford. So in the various times that he got sued during his kind of illustrious career, there's been all sorts of depositions taken in this regard, and he has one of them. So I'm just going to read from this. This is the case is. I'll get you the name of the case in a second. But anyhow, it goes here to say, information regarding your background for the business plan, is that correct? He's answering, probably. That's what they contributed to. Question, and do you have, as you sit here today, do you have any recollection of anyone else writing your biography for the business plan? No, that doesn't mean that I wrote it. And as you read the bio for you, and the business plan on page 14, is everything in that bio true and correct? Yeah, yes. Okay, so you received a BS in computational physics from Penn. Yeah. Okay, when you worked at Microsoft's Advanced Products. Actually, I should be clear about that. So I obtained the one graduate degree in business and physics, and an agreement with the University of Pennsylvania. They said that I could complete the English and history credits when I was no longer a student at Stanford. So they would delay transmitting the degree until I had done that, granting you a BS degree in British degree. And I think it continues to the next page. But you get here we go, of computer. I'm sorry, let me just put up the right slide here and then pick it up. Maybe you can help me pick it up because I'm reading so much here. Do you want to play Elon? I'll do. And you got a BS in that in physics. Can you play Elon here?
You just threw the slide up. It just says, I don't know. It says I'm not good in Latin. I can't quite read this, but the dude doesn't look. This is not an uncommon thing with grifters and spies and folks and stuff. I mean, the guy runs grifts. I mean, nobody. Just ask yourself something. How would anybody have enough time to run as many companies as he has and tweet as much as he has?
It's impossible.
And
it's impossible to be
constantly going on. I mean, he's more interested in podcasts and trolling than he is space, transition of electric vehicles, or transition to electric vehicles from a fossil fuel based fleet. I mean,
he's got not who he says he is.
The Hyperloop,
Neuralink.
Oh, that's right. He's going to implant, Ataris in our heads or whatever. I mean, so it should be no surprise to find that, he didn't study what he said he studied. He's very clearly a front for different forces. I mean, I don't buy the origin story of, he starts with $28,000 from dad in 1995 and just ends up with, an 8-digit, net worth. I'm sure that was all organic, anytime you hear 5 digits becoming 8, there's, it's
Look, I think
something, there's a force at play. And if it's genius, that does happen. Although a lot of geniuses get taken advantage of by business grifters.
Yeah. It seems to me that the actual
genius alone doesn't do it.
Yeah. Look, I think we're seeing here, and why it's important, why I think it's important to look at some of the stuff is because, we've whether we know or don't know that he's a Chinese asset, whether we accept that or don't accept that, there is an understanding sort of that he's some sort of, smart dude, that he's capable beyond other people's capability. And yet we've now entrusted him, even though he's done this simply out as an aggressive purchase, but still, we sort of as a society have said, okay, let's give Elon Musk a chance to try do his thing with Twitter. But there's nothing in Elon Musk's past that makes him feel like he's credible or able to do any of these things. I mean, yes, there's a company that produces cars that are run on electric vehicles, but is it his doing? I don't know. SpaceX, is it his doing? I don't know. It doesn't seem to me like if he can't even be honest about his degrees that he had at university, if he can't cough up a true biography of where he went to, whether he went to Stanford or not, it's crucial that people sort of know this about him if we're going to hand over big chunks of our, of our town square in this case, or other parts of our economy to them. And because he's also got some unusual plans. It's not just that he wants to do, wants to like allow people verification for $8 a month. His plans for Twitter are quite remarkable. This comes from some of the evidence that was released in the court case around his purchase of Twitter. And in it, he talks about wanting to create a blockchain social media system that does both payments and short messages backed onto Twitter. You have to pay a tiny amount to register your message on the chain, which will cut out the vast majority of spam and bots. There's no threat to free speech is guaranteed. Now, I don't know if this is true, but is it okay for this guy who might be a Chinese asset, who may have lied about his where he went to school, to come on into a place like Twitter and turn it into a blockchain, a currency of some sort? I mean, it's speculative still, but I think it's still very challenging that we don't have very much transparency into who Elon Musk is and what he is doing at Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, the money's not going to launder itself, right? So I guess we need we need to add some cryptocurrency to tweets or something.
I guess that's how they spend $55 billion.
It's not especially, the Twitter's already changing. I got other people's tweets turning up my timeline. They fired all but 2 attorneys or something. They got rid of all these coders. I think the only useful thing he said is, he sort of let a little bit of a cat out of the bag with, will any of the people who actually can code meet me on the 10th floor, which is like, he was letting the cat out of the bag that there's a lot of people at these tech companies who get gigs because of who their parents are and not from what they can do, or because they're basically spies for some other country. So that was interesting to actually see represented. But look, one wonders how the functionality of, any company is going to go, and you start bleeding talent to that degree. But what's interesting here is you go back to the 90s, is you go like this, the one generation of American technological rollout here got heavily infiltrated by foreigners and spies. Mm-hmm. And around that time, I was working think tanks in Washington, D.C., looking at the future of technology and science and social trends. And there was a heavy hand of the intelligence community in that. And after 9/11, all of that got sucked out of D.C. and sent over to San Francisco, where it was put in the hands of all these people that did not have the national security of the United States or any other country in mind. And we are seeing, and part of that's from the Clinton era, that they opened the door to this, and we are paying the bill on that. And, now we need a firm hand from a strong government that can come in and control the rollout of the most powerful technologies in human history. And it cannot be left up to a bunch of people who make up their fucking report cards from 3rd grade.
Exactly.
That's done.
Look, I think it's really, what you're saying is absolutely true. And when you look into the real history of Elon Musk at Silicon Valley, you know, XCOM, which was the X.com, which is the company that he launched preceding PayPal. Yes, it was him as the figurehead guy in front of it. But actually, if you look at the other founders, there's like 5 Chinese nationals there who helped him with X.com, which they transformed into PayPal. And then when you look at actual PayPal's own description, this is the PayPal's own description from the time period, was that PayPal is committed to providing Chinese companies with world-class proclaimed
procurement, expenditure management, software as a service solutions.
Yeah. They were working to help the Chinese do this kind of stuff. And before that, he was...
What could it all mean?
What could it all mean? And, you know, fast forward to now, this guy is running Twitter, and it's lying about how he got there, lying about his degrees. I don't know. We have questions about Elon Musk that make you a little terrified about what may be happening next to Twitter, but we're in here for the long haul. At least I am. I hope you are too. And we'll see what happens in the coming months. We're over time. But thank you, Eric. A good show. Really interesting stuff. Thank you for raising that Sheldon Whitehouse stuff. Tell people about your podcast, because I had just refound it. I don't know if it's been out there again on YouTube, but it's really great to see you on video doing it. And it's really fascinating. So tell people about that and where they can find it.
Same old game theory today.
You're on mute.
It's got my head in it, though. And
you're still on mute.
I'm not from myself. I can hear me.
Can't hear you.
How are we doing?
I can't hear you. Can everyone else hear you? I don't know what you're saying, so I'm going to say it for you, that there is a very, very good podcast by Eric Garland called Game Theory on YouTube. Hopefully Eric will also post it on the link below. People are saying that they can hear you, but I can't hear you. So go ahead and say what you were going to say, and then tell me when you stop talking. I'll play the closing credits.
I just got a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Eric Garland Trends, or look for my name. And it's me and talking about this stuff.
So everyone check that out. Thank you, Eric.
Especially since we don't know what's going to happen with Twitter, and YouTube seems to be a lot more stable. So
absolutely, and it's a great podcast. It's really fun and interesting. You get a lot of, you get to learn about the news of the day. But I love your insights into the intelligence world, and you can always learn something from those podcasts. It's really great to have both. You walk away feeling like you've had a full meal, and that's great. So Game Theory Today with Eric Garland, check it out. And you can always support Narrative at patreon.com/narrative. And you can also subscribe to our channels. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button right now. And also, if you're watching Game Theory Today, or you're watching Narrative on YouTube, or if you're watching them on Twitter, you can certainly watch Narrative on Twitter. Don't forget to follow our accounts, Eric Garland and Zev Shalev. Make sure you stay on top of all our updates. And with that, we wish you a very good night. We'll see you again on Tuesday night. Have a good night, everybody. Every minute of Narrative's reporting, every story that we break, is made possible by our patrons. You too can become a patron by joining at patreon.com/narrative.
Narrative, where truth lives. One day, you'll tell the story of autocrats, crooks, and kings who came for our freedom. A story of citizens who stood up to tyranny and won. The people prevailed and renewed an old vow to a more perfect union. And that was just the beginning. The story continues. Narrative, where truth lives.